All right, you guys, we are talking about the cell. So this is the beginning of Unit 2, and you can check out in Chapter 7.1, pages 193 to 194. It'll tell you a little bit more about the concept of cell theory. And so cell theory is made of three parts. The first part is that all living things are made of cells. So this is because all of the biological reactions that we need for living things are done inside of the cell. It creates like a little reaction chamber. So the cell is kind of like a tiny reaction chamber. So all those little chemical reactions are happening inside of the cell. There's all those chemical reactions that are happening, and the cell helps to kind of contain all those chemical reactions. The next thing is that cells are the building blocks of living things. And we've talked a little bit before about how things are unicellular or they are multicellular. So things that are unicellular are things like bacteria, archaebacteria, and also protists. Those are things that are unicellular. And then multicellular things are things like fungi or fungus, plants, and animals. And there's some exceptions to these rules, but for the most part, protist bacteria and archaebacteria are only one cell big. They're unicellular. Uni means one. Whereas fungi, plants, and animals are multicellular. They're made of many cells. And then the last thing is that number 3 here is all cells come from other cells. So cells can grow and divide. And we talked about 2 ways that they can grow and divide. Well, they can grow and divide if they are bacteria. They do that through the process of binary fission. And if they are multicellular, then they typically go through the process of cell division or the cell cycle. Now, you probably already know this, but most cells are really small in size. You can't see a lot of cells with your eye. You need a microscope, right? Oops. Need a microscope to see these things. And there's a few reasons for this, but maybe the most important is that there's a high surface area to volume ratio, which means that cells are more efficient. They're better at getting stuff into the cell and removing stuff out of the cell. So we need to remember high surface area to volume ratio, and this makes cells more efficient. So cells need to move substances like maybe nutrients, nutrients need to go into the cell, and then you've got waste products that build up inside the cell. These are waste products, and they need to be removed out of the cell. And to do that efficiently, to be able to do that quickly and get stuff into the cell and allow the cell to use it quickly, you need to have a high surface area to volume ratio. The other reason is that it minimizes the amount of structures. So we want to minimize the amount of structures and the amount of genetic material that you need inside of the cell. And this is because if you have really, really large structures, then they're going to need a lot of nutrients and a lot of support to do that. And it takes time for those nutrients to move across the cell. But maybe more important is that if you have a lot of demand on the genetic material, then it's going to be difficult for the cell to function at its best. Let's make a little comparison here. So for example, think about a library. Think about a library with, I don't know, let's say 10 copies of each book. Okay, so there's 10 copies of each book, but let's say that there are, I don't know, let's maybe say that there are 50, or let's say there's 100 students. Okay, the chances that a student goes down and gets a book, say they want a copy of their biology textbook, the chances are that a student goes down to the library to get a copy, it's there still, right? There's only 100 students, right? And there's 10 copies of each book. So chances of finding a book are high. Now imagine if that same library, the library, still only has 10 books. 10 copies of each book. 10 copies per book. But now, let's say that we have 10,000 students. Well, the number of students, right? The number of students has increased. Number of students has increased. And so the chances that that book is still there, chances of finding a book in the library, that decreases, right? The chances go down. Because now you've got 100 times more students accessing the same amount of information. So that's the thing to remember, is that even though, or I guess when, let's say when a cell increases in size, its DNA remains the same. So in this case here, the number of books, this is the DNA, right? This is the information. And the students are the organelles. These here, the students are the organelles inside of the cell. This is the structures inside of the cell that are doing specific jobs. So if you increase the size of the cell, then you increase all the quantity of stuff inside of the cell, and therefore you're going to need more DNA, but the DNA does not, the amount of DNA does not increase until cell division, okay? So the cell must divide to increase the amount of DNA, right, of genetic information. So all that to say, cells prefer to be small because they are much more efficient, because it maximizes the membrane surface, which helps get nutrients in and waste products out, and it helps to minimize the amount of structures that are asking for that genetic information. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of surface area to volume ratio. All right, cells are a variety of sizes, and so over here we've got a scale of different sizes going from 10 meters, which is about 2 humans in size, to 1 meter, which is about a human size roughly, and a little bit smaller, and then down to 0.1 meter, and then 1 centimeter, 1 millimeter. So this is decreasing. Every level here is decreasing by a factor of 10. This is a logarithmic scale. You might know that from your math classes. This is a logarithmic scale. And if you look here, this is kind of the, down at the bottom here, this is just the atoms and small molecules that we find. They're about 1 nanometer, or between 0.1 and 1 nanometer in size. These are atoms and molecules. It's very, very, very small. As we go a little bit bigger into that 10 nanometer zone, now we get some larger macromolecules like proteins and lipids. So these here are like the biological. Let me do this smaller. These here are like the biological molecules. Here we've got ribosomes. Ribosomes here, we'll talk about those are later. Here we got viruses. Viruses are kind of that gray area between living and non-living. And so they're a little bit smaller than bacteria. So here we've got our typical cells, but right here, this is bacteria. And then this is like plants and animal cells. Plant/animal cells. So plants and animal cells are about 10 times larger than bacteria cells. Bacteria cells are down here, and animal and plant cells are up here. And animal plant cells are bigger than bacteria. Bacteria are bigger than viruses. Viruses are quite small, and they tend to infect these types of cells. So yeah, we talk about how we talk about these sizes of the micrometer and the nanometer. stands for a micrometer, whereas NM stands for a nanometer. And yeah, most living things are between a micrometer and 100 micrometers. Viruses, as far as we're concerned, aren't considered living things, but they are important to kind of just rank in terms of their size here.